right, I was talking to the owner of 69 Beetle. He came on by and looked at it a few days ago. By the time you're watching this video, that should already be uploaded. You'll get to see his reaction to this car and the work that I've done on it. He was quite pleased, very happy with it, but beyond that, I was talking to him about the brakes that are on here and the fact that they are drums, and would you like a set of disc brakes and drop spindles? And the answer was yes. You know, if you've got them, install them. So anyway, that's part of the project of what we're going to do today. These brake upgrade videos are usually pretty good for views, so we're going to do it again. I don't think I've shown a front-end replacement with drop spindles specifically, so we're going to do that this time around. If you like these videos, as always, please give me a thumbs up. Please click the subscribe button that you see down here in the corner and ring the little bell that's next to it. I really thank you for that, because every time that I upload a new video, you will get a notification, so you'll know immediately when to go watch. As always, my videos are uploaded on duckshit.net nice and early. Please visit the website if you haven't been there yet. It is currently a Patreon page, but I probably won't be staying that way for too much longer, because I discovered from the few sponsors that I have on there that they eat up about 40-45% of my money in bank fees, so I probably won't be staying there too much longer. I will wind up keeping my website, duckshit.net, but I'll do some custom programming of my own, so you'll see that coming up sometime in the near future. So anyway, with that said, we're going to get to work on this, and we're going to start tearing this car apart. Okay, here's the front disc brake kit with a drop spindle for a ball joint Beetle. This is from the later models, which is from, I believe it's 1965 and up. Not Super. Super Beetles had something entirely different. But the ball joint front end Beetles would use this kit. Here's your caliper, of course. Here is your disc. Here is your disc bracket, which actually sits up here on this spindle. I think I got that backwards. I think it goes on like this. And your caliper attaches to that. Your disc drops right on top of that with your hub, which is part of the disc. Anyway, fully assembled, it'll look like this. And these are new parts that I got 22 years ago. I think it was 1996 that I picked this kit up. And these were originally going to go on my 69 Beetle that I had then. Down the road, 20-something years later, I got the oval. And the oval, actually, I built it up on a late model Beetle chassis, which is ball joint IRS. So I had this kit, and I said, you know, that's a great place to use it. So I went ahead and started putting this stuff on there, but then when I started going with the wider fenders and the Porsche wheels and things, the 4-lug just wasn't going to cut it, and I needed to have a wider stance. So I moved away from this idea, which is what you see here, which is great. I mean, this is a wonderful concept, and these work wonderfully. But I moved over to this. So this is what's going to be going on the oval. And there's some interesting things here that I discovered, and some people have said to me that this braking system is way overweight, and it wouldn't be advantageous. You know, the braking performance doesn't really negate all of the cons that are experienced by an overweight system. But I did a little bit of math, and we're going to cover that in another video. But I measured the weights of some of these things compared to the stock Beetle stuff, as well as another aftermarket kit from a well-known name brand. And the results to you might be rather surprising as to which one is actually the lightest and the heaviest, and, you know, just looks, performance, and you consider all the factors, you might be rather surprised what the results are, including when it comes down to individual parts, like this caliper versus the Porsche caliper. Look at these here. You tell me which one is lighter. Guess. Just guess. And why is the one lighter? And how much lighter is it? So I'm going to leave you guys with that, and I'll do an update on a later video as to what the huge difference is between these two parts. Right away you can see the difference in the size of the braking pads that are on there. You know, these are almost 3 times the surface area that these have. The disc itself on the Beetle one is a solid disc, you know, no vented or anything. This is on the 944 disc, it is vented, and I got cross-drilled. I did that on purpose. It actually lightened the weight considerably. I did some math on that too, and believe it or not, those holes actually saved a lot of weight on it. So I kind of like that. There's also an aluminum hub in here, and underneath it is a Beetle drop spindle. This is not completed yet. I still have to work on the bearing sleeves or whatever it is. I just plugged this together as a dry fit with the Porsche bearings. Of course, it's not safe. Certainly not safe to mount in that condition. So it's not going on a car yet until I get that sorted out. What we're going to do today is mount up this ball joint disc brake kit, get these installed on that Beetle. We're going to show you how. And in addition to that, we're also going to replace the tie rods that are on that car, which I wasn't going to do. But the guy wanted me to do it anyway, and after that it's going to go to alignment shop because of all this work. So it had bad ball joints on the end of it, and the rods look like crap. So we're going to get those upgraded, changed out as well. We're going to show you how that's done. So, you know, if you like my videos, go ahead and thumb up. Please subscribe. You know, I'm glad to have you guys watching. There's been a lot of growth on my channel in recent months, and I really appreciate that. And I couldn't have done it without your views, your likes. I mean, giving me those thumbs up really makes a huge difference. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that little bell that's over here in the corner. Don't forget, that gives you notifications and updates every time that I go ahead and put up a new video. So thanks a lot for subscribing. Thanks a lot for liking this video. And thanks for watching. Well, one of the first things we're going to want to do is take the wheels off. And I think I've got the right size. That lug nut was already loose. Yep, that's the right size. And no, let's see here. How about this one? Alright, that gets them started. And it looks like I've managed to rip my pants. So alright, now you want to jack it up. And the best way to do that is to get right under the axle beam with your favorite floor jack. And you want to get under the center, or at least as close to the center as you can get. Do not jack up under your frame head, because if that's rusty, you might punch a hole through the bottom of it. And if it's not rusty, you still might dent it. So bring this sucker up. And once it's up, get your jack stand under there. And you only need the one jack stand. If you're worried about peace of mind, you can put in a second one, but one is enough to do it. Alright, all set. Alright, you want to take out the rest of the lug nuts all the way. Lug nuts. Alright, off the wheel comes. I will have to admit that I have not seen brake drums with a beveled shape on it before. Usually these come up to a right angle and in. He's probably used narrower brake pads, kind of like the earlier years did. I probably have not encountered these because people have upgraded them over the years, or perhaps this is an aftermarket upgrade and I don't know why anybody would go backwards, but these are different, and I'm sure somebody out there in internet land that's currently watching this video will tell me how I'm wrong or something, but as I said, I haven't seen them before, not even on my 69 Beetles that I've had, and I've had several of them. Alright, normally you would be unclipping from the driver's side here. You would be unclipping the speedometer cable. It normally comes through this little square hole. Because we had the body off of it, it's already been removed. But usually there's a little clip on the end of this. In this case, when I removed it, the clip wasn't even there. But it actually pulls out from the back side of the spindle. So around the back side here, you would actually just pull that cable right out. But anyway, like I said, it's already been removed. There's nothing to worry about here. We will put this back together when we're done. But because I had the body off, that was one of those things that had to come off in order to lift the body, or you're going to screw up the cable. Now to remove the dust cap on the end here, which covers the bearings, I've seen a lot of people do a lot of silly things to remove it. They just start smashing on it with a hammer, trying to pry at it with wrenches. But I've discovered that a hammer actually is the best option, but not the way you might think. A claw hammer actually works real good to get behind the lip on it and just kind of pry it out. And it almost will always just pop right off. There it is. And it even conveniently landed in my hubcap parts bin. it's good to use something to hold your nuts and bolts that you pull off, because otherwise when they get on the ground, you're going to walk around and you're going to kick them all over the place. So put them in a safe place, and then put them up under the car where you're not going to be stepping, or where any of your friends are going to be walking, because they're not going to have any respect for your junk. And they're just going to kick it everywhere, and your stuff's going to get lost. And when it's time to put it back together, you're going to be pissed off. Well, anyway, it's time for a drink. So I'm having me a little Korean flavor. These are good. I like them. Now these brakes are identical on both the driver's side and the passenger side, with two exceptions. The driver's side, of course, has the speedometer cable that goes through the spindle and out through the end here, the dust cap. And the second thing is that this pinch nut that's on the end here that retains the bearings is reverse threaded on the driver's side. So once we loosen the little pinch nut here, this thing is actually going to loosen by turning it to the right, and we'll tighten it by turning it to the left. So completely the opposite of what you might be expecting. So I've got to get a little Allen key tool to loosen that up, and unless this has been over torqued, I can probably loosen it by hand, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. Let's go ahead and grab the right tools for it. First, want to loosen the bolt on the pinch nut, and then once you've got that, you're going to take it off, and you're actually going to turn it in reverse direction. And you don't need the tool to do that. I just did that because it was convenient. It was there, and this is usually very greasy. So pull that out, and make sure you have something clean to put this on. I like to lay a little clean rag out here in the bottom and put all these little nuts, washers, and bearings down on that. You're not going to worry about them. Okay. Once you've got that nut off, pull on the drum gently, and you might be able to get it past the brake shoes. I usually do. This one feels like it's got a little crud behind it. Alright, there's your bearing, and there's your special retaining washer. You see how it's got the little tooth that's in there. Let's see if I can get this off without having to futz too much with the brakes here. There it is. Usually I could do that a little quicker than that, but the drum is now off. The other bearing is still inside of there with the dust seal. These parts we're going to try to retain. Once we get a good inspection of the bearings, and if we find that they're in good enough shape, we're going to reuse them. Okay, next thing that has to come off is the backing plate. Actually, you have to remove the brake line as well, because when you go to remove the black backing plate, the brake line is going to do a dangly thing. But we're going to take care of all that at once. These bolts that are on here, I believe are 17s. I might be wrong. I'm going to have to grab my socket set because it's just out of reach because I'm a dumbass. I was incorrect. These are 15s. Watch your knuckles when you loosen these things. That's why I've got it on an extension. You can use an impact on here if you would like. But I'm doing this without power tools on purpose to prove that it can be done without power tools. Alright, there's our brake line that needs to come off. As I said, this was going to do a dangly bit, so you want to go ahead and remove this now. And the reason why I told you to remove this at this point is because if it's on here, you can't turn the brake line. The brake line is actually attached to this in such a way that if you turn it, you're just going to twist the line, and you'll end up putting knots in it, kinks in it, or you'll just break it. Once this is off and free like this and dangly, you can actually loosen it and turn the entire brake backing plate around the line. Conversely. Now, if you're going to be replacing these brake lines, this would be a good time to do it, in which case you could just cut the damn thing and not have to worry about it. But in our case, these were replaced somewhat recently, so these are in decent enough shape that I don't believe that the owner of this vehicle needs to go through all of that deal. Alright, as I said, you're going to turn this around the brake line. This is going to drip some fluid, so make sure you have a rag underneath it to catch. And I didn't show that but there is one beneath it. Currently the brake reservoir is off of here, so there's very little fluid that's left in the line, and whatever's left in there should drip off, and it won't take very long. Now we've got to remove the spindle. This is the spindle right here. There's three things that are holding it onto the vehicle. The first one, of course, is the tie rod, which is right up here. Then there's two nuts that are on the reverse side of it. Right here and right here. And those all come off pretty easily. Every single one of them is the same size. They're all 19 millimeters. And these sometimes can be rusted on there pretty well. But for the most part, the nuts come off relatively easily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up the nuts until they are almost completely off. A little more. These are lock nuts, by the way, so they pinch rather tight. So they're really tough to loosen by hand. Alright, we've got that set. Now we need a tie rod puller on there. Okay, this is a ball joint puller, and these are used for a lot of different things, but what they're really removed for is removing ball joints and tie rods. And in this case, you get it clasped around there kind of like that. Zoomy zoomy, there we go. And then the trick is, and this is great, you just keep tightening this until that tie rod actually pops right out. And there's a reason why I left that nut on there, and that's so I don't mess up the threads on the tie rod. Although it really shouldn't matter anyway, because on this car, they've already been chewed up so badly that the tie rod ends are getting replaced anyway. That's it. Pop, pop, pop music. Now we can turn the spindle around, look at the back side of it. The first nut is real obvious right there. The second nut is up here in the shadow. We've got to loosen those the same. The top one will be pull, just like that. Now the top ball joint here is usually pretty easy to remove. Sometimes you could just bang on this a little bit. It'll come free from the top one. In this case it didn't. Sometimes you got to put a pry bar in between here too, and there it is, it came right out. Yeah, these usually separate pretty easily on the top. The bottom ones, however, they need to be pressed apart. That's all there is to lifting it out. And the bottom one. This one I like to turn it around the other way. That gives you a little extra ability to freeze it up in your hands there. Now this lower ball joint is the one that's going to be the tricky one to remove. And I haven't had a whole lot of luck with the tools that they tell you that you're supposed to use. The tie rod puller that I just demonstrated on the tie rod almost works. It's a Volkswagen specific part. Actually, it's a Volkswagen numbered tool. I don't have one of those, so I can't tell you what kind of experience I'd have with it. Okay, same as before, you want to disassemble it. And yes, the wider jawed tool did fit. Then you go through the upper ball joint hole with that bolt for the tool. And screw it down against the bottom in here. You see how that all goes together. And then you want to tighten up this. Actually, I don't know why I'm doing it this way. This tool actually has a square drive in the top of it, so you can feed it with a ratchet. And this will all of a sudden bang and pop off, and if it does not, you can actually give it a wrap. And sometimes that will do it. In this case, it hasn't come loose yet. Of course, I'm using the wrong tool. That's not what this is meant for. Nope, still nada. Okay. And that means keep turning the bolt. Oops, wrong wrench. Everything on this is 19mm, by the way, including the tools. Boom! That's how it's done. Take our tool bag out and come on down here and loosen this nut out. So continue to remove this nut until it's out. Everything goes as planned. You should end up with a spindle in your hands once the nut is removed. That's it. One spindle removed. This is what we're going to replace with the drop spindle. Okay, with some solvent here, I want to drop in the bearings. I'll drop in the nut too, and the washer. We're just going to get everything clean. You got to take the bearing and the seal out of the other side of the drum as well, and drop that in here too. Here's the other bearing and the seal. Get them all in there. Let them soak. Now this solvent shouldn't be too tough on that seal, and if it is, we're going to replace the seal too. But that'll be good. We're trying to get all the grease cleaned out of these things so that we can get them inspected and see what they look like and see whether we're going to reuse them or replace them. Now we need to knock the old bearings out of the drum here, well, at least the outer races to them anyway. And you can see the one race is here, and the other race is down inside of there. You can see that ring that goes around. Now that has to be knocked free. And using a punch like this here, you can do it. This is actually a steel punch. I'm going to have to be delicate with it. You should use a brass one on here, so that way you don't accidentally monkey up the bearings by smashing into them too hard. But it's just a matter of getting behind the lip here like this, and then just whack the end of it nice and gently with a hammer, and you'll feel it move. It'll actually come out of place, and the bearing will come through, and then you crisscross to the other side, tap it once or twice more, and vice versa, until finally the thing comes out. Now, I'd try to do it here, but unfortunately I don't have a good enough tripod to hold the camera up at a proper angle to show me actually doing this kind of work. And it's a goofy place, and I can't get the light in there, and I'm having a lot of problems with that, so I'm going to give you a quick synopsis on this here, and go with it as you see it. You know, thank the universe for small favors. In this case, they actually tapped out only a few taps on either side, and they actually fell right out. I didn't have to hit them particularly hard or anything either, so that's kind of nice. So I'm going to throw them in the solvent, get them cleaned up, we're going to get them inspected, and if they're nice and smooth and they don't appear to be too worn out, we're actually going to reuse them and mount them inside of a fresh hub. Well, both of these bearings look quite good. I'm not seeing any grooves hammered in there, there's no rough spots. There's no dents, and those are the kind of things that are caused by hitting potholes or running over parking curbs, or, you know, essentially slamming the wheels into something would cause the bearings to get hammered or dented. And these are perfectly smooth. It includes both the inner and the outers. They're both looking really good. I'm not seeing any reason to have to replace these. So we're going to go with them and get them reinstalled inside of a disc. Okay, in order to get this bearing race mounted inside of this hub, we're going to have to use a tool to do it. You don't just want to, start hammering on the thing and mess it up. What you want to do is use a proper bearing driving tool and drive this into place. But I'm not a rich man, nor do I have enough space to put this junk in my garage. I'm just running out of room, and I don't use them often enough to justify spending the money. But what you can use is an appropriate sized socket that's of the same or very close diameter. You want to go smaller, of course, not bigger. Put this on here, and then you can gently tap that into place. Oops, I got started and I didn't want to yet. Anyway, that's that. But the first thing you want to do before you even drive that in there is make sure that the inside here is clean. Make sure you've got no spoo in there. And then, using a little bit of grease, you want to go ahead and coat the outside of this race. And these are tapered. There's a big end and a small end. That's the big end, and that's the small skinny end. And you want to always have the big end go in first. And the reason for that is because the bearing that you squeeze into this will actually press right into that. Well, I shouldn't say press. It actually, friction, well, not even friction. It actually pushes against it. So that's how that works. If you put it in backwards, you'll never get the bearing in, and then you'll be called an idiot by all your friends. But anyway, we've got that in there. Now we're ready to start driving this thing. So get it as level as you can in the hole, and then tap it into its seat. And this will take several dozen hits to get it in. And you'll know when it's all in all the way because the tone of it changes. It'll go from this very hollow sound to a very high pink sound once it's in all the way. There it is. Hear the tone changed? That means the bearing is in. So that seat has now been sat in its proper position. So it's ready to go. And we're going to flip it over, and you want to do the same thing to the other side. Alright, we're ready to start putting this spindle back on. And what we're going to need to do here is we're going to get a little bit of this grease, and we're going to smear it around these ball joint stems. And we're doing this on purpose, so that way when the next guy comes to take this apart, hopefully it won't be so hard and it won't be rusted or fused together, which very often is the case. I did a little more inspection around here, and I thought that the ball joint rubber was split, but it's not. It's actually got a crack forming all the way around it, but it is not split all the way through. So I'm going to actually leave that alone, and well, for the next time he's getting ready to have his ball joints replaced, that will be the time that he'll need to be concerned with that. But it's not split, so there's no water getting in there. I'm not worried about water intrusion, so we're going to leave it alone. Okay, we want to get the spindle, and you make sure that you've got the correct one for the correct side. In this case, this is the left-hand side one. Just going to give it a good wipe down here, because there's a little bit of old grease still on it to protect it from getting rusty. I was smart enough to do that when I put it into storage. Plunk your magic hubcap, Froggy! Boing! Alright. Now, on these ball joints, there's two washers that go on them. Big washer and a small washer. Big washer goes on the top one because there's a big hole in that spindle right here. So you don't want that little guy to pull through. So this is what stops that from happening. And the small washer goes on the bottom. Alright, we're going to drop the bottom one in first. Just like that. Washer it. And then we'll find us our nut. And then we're going to nut all over. And it looks like this little stub here that's sticking out. I'm going to grease it up a little more. Make the nut go on a little easier for whatever it's worth. And I'll do the same thing to this side. A little more grease on it. It really can't hurt to have, well, too much grease on it. The worst case is you're just going to have to wipe it off. Alright, here we go. Put this nut back on here. Put that on there. And we're going to tighten this down before we get to the upper one, because you can actually go through the spindle hole and get to the bottom one. So you can do this with a ratchet, which makes life a lot easier. And that makes life a lot easier. Okay, now we're not going to torque it to spec just yet. We're going to get the upper one into place. And these are real tricky to torque, because it's really hard to get a wrench in there. Okay, the upper one's got to go on next. As a one-man operation, it's a lot easier to get a lever in here and lift that one up. Slide your spindle under. Go. Spindle is now inserted. Now on this little guy, this upper nut that's on here, there's a notch in it. And the notch needs to point forward. Now sometimes this notch is a little hard to find. What we're going to do is we're going to put a wrench on here, we're going to turn it. Until we find the notch. There it is. I'm going to get the camera around this side so you can see it. That's the little notch right there. That needs to point forward. Okay, the caliper mounting bracket goes on next. And what this does is allows you to mount the caliper onto the spindles, which would normally accept a drum brake backing plate. So this goes on just like this here with the 3 bolts going through it. Real simple installation. There's not too much to this at all, really. But then again, when it comes to most things Volkswagen, they're really not that hard. Okay, got those in there. Snug them up. Set our torque wrench to 36 foot-pounds. Alright. And tighten these bad boys up. Good to go. Backing plate is now installed. Next thing that goes on is our disc with the hub. Alright, this wrench is 6 inches, so in order to get this thing torqued down properly here, which I can't get my torque wrench in there, we're going to attach it like this, and I've got a scale. And I'm going to put this up into here, and I'm going to pull until I hit 2 times, which is on the scale. There it is. That gets that tight enough. Flip this around the other way. Attach the wrench one more time. Here it is. Now this plate that's on the front here, I did this in between videos because I wasn't thinking. I recorded things out of order because I didn't hit the record button. But this is your caliper mount. This plate is actually an add-on to spindles that are intended for drum brakes. So these were originally intended for drum brakes, but this will retrofit you and allow you to attach the caliper to the disc brake setup. So that all works out nicely. Okay, we're ready to drop that disc and hub on there next. So what we want to do is we want to slather down the spindle shaft here with some grease. Go ahead and get it in the threads. Get it all the way around. And it doesn't hurt to get up a little bit around here either. The concept is that we want to get as much of this on there as possible. So if any moisture does manage to get in here, it won't rust it out. Alright. Here we are, ready to go. We're going to drop that disc on there next. We've already got the bearings in this, both on the inside and the outside. I've got my thumbs on it like this to keep the bearings in place as I press it in. There it is. Can't forget our washer. And it has the little tooth in there, so you have to line that up with the groove. Just like that. And then a little more grease on it. Pack that in there real nice. Alright, and lastly that goes on is our pinch nut. And you remember, this is the driver's side, so it's going to be reverse threaded. So we're going to tighten it by turning it to the left. Now these guys are installed really simply. You just tighten it until it's finger tight, just like that, and then you spin it. And then you might be able to tighten it a little more, and ow, mother. Spin it again, and tighten it a little more. Spin it again, tighten it a little more. Eventually to get to the point where you can't finger tighten it anymore, and that's when you've got to stop. Now there is a torque spec on this. But according to a lot of the old school Volkswagen books as to how to, you know, maintain your old Volkswagens, the trick seems to be spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, get it as tight as you can, finger tight, and then loosen it 1/12 of a turn. And you see how this top of the nut is pointing straight up? Well, we want to get it so that way this flat spot is pointing up instead. So that right there is where it's going to be, and this is how tight they're supposed to be. And if you shake it, there is just ever so slightly, and I mean, I almost can't even feel it, bearing play that's in there. And it's always a little better to have your bearings slightly looser than tighter, because if you make them too tight, you're going to chew them up and just destroy them. And if they're loose, well, they're just going to be kind of sloppy. So, like I said, it's always better to have them a little too loose than too tight. But in this case, that gets you within spec. And a lot of the old school Volkswagen shops that I've spoken to over the years all agreed that that's probably the best way to treat this. Now we're going to take our little Allen key to put in our pinch nut down here, and we're going to tighten this sucker up. I don't remember what the torque spec is on this, but this one you just want to get it tight so that way that nut doesn't move. That gets it. One drum. Ooh, it ain't no drum. One hub with disc now mounted. I'm going to clean up this disc real good before we ever step on the brakes in this thing. But anyway, that's installed. I'm going to get a little more grease, coat that nut. Again, this is in case of water intrusion. If water should ever get in this, it's not going to rust out because it's covered in grease. Some people like to go crazy and pack it with even more than that, but I think they're ridiculous. That's enough to get it. You don't need to fill up the whole dust cover. And that's what that is. The dust cover goes on real simple. Just give it a light wrap. And it's on. Then from the back side, actually it doesn't even want to go in. I'm going to have to play with that, figure out exactly what the hell's going on here. But anyway, you get the point. This is going to slide in from the back. Well, after I investigated why that Speedo cable wouldn't go through in here, it was determined that when I put these spindles away almost 20 years ago, I packed grease in them. And the grease had become kind of weathered and turned into like a wax, so I couldn't get the cable to go through. So anyway, there's our cable sticking out. Gonna put our dust cover back on here. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and just re-grease this thing a little more here before we push it back through. You never have too much grease. You just can't. Alright, line this up. Push this into place. I'm going to have to search for the clip on that because I'm not certain where exactly that went. Damn, the wind must be blowing in the right direction today that I get all the damn planes flying over while I'm trying to work here. So anyway, there it is. This is all set and ready to go. I'm going to have to use a little brake parts cleaner and clean off my greasy fingerprints from on here. And I'm going to have to get the caliper mounted next, of course. Alright. Our caliper is going to mount from the back side, but before we do anything about putting the caliper onto this car, we need to get the line mounted. And the reason why we're doing a line first is because the same reason why I took it off last before, because we're going to spin the caliper around the line like this, because we don't want to move that line. Alright, once we've got that line snug enough, we're going to get the caliper mounted to where it belongs, which is going to go on just like that. And around the back side, there's two bolts. Each one has a washer. And they're going to go through the caliper and screw into the bracket. I'm not sure if the camera can see that. There's the one, and the other one is down below here. Yeah, so it's a little bit out of view, but we're just going to get them snugged up, and then we're going to torque them down. What's going on here? Something's fucky. Well, that's weird. The bolt heads are actually two different sizes. I don't know how that happened over the years, but it looks like one's a 16 and one's a 17. I'm gonna say the outfit in California that sent them to me probably are the ones who did that. Because these were not retail packaged brakes, these were custom picked and assembled in a cardboard box and packed accordingly. I have to torque that down to get it to where it's supposed to be, but otherwise the assembly is nearly complete. I've got to drop the tie rod into place, I've got to torque this down, put the wheel on, and of course bleed it, and I can't forget to put that little clip on there for the Speedo cable. I'm not even sure where that thing is. If not, I'll stop at the big box home improvement store tonight and get a little circlip that fits over that. They're pretty easy to come by. The good thing is all of these studs that are on here actually match the lug nuts that were on here previously, so the customer gets to use his same old lugs that he had before. So that's nice because we know they work with his wheels. Alright, the caliper mounting bolts are torqued down to 30 foot-pounds. Got that set here. There it goes. And then the upper one, which is a different size bolt. Also 30. I didn't hear it click. There it goes. Didn't require much. Alright. Everything is mounted. I'm going to clean up these guys. Some people might say, oh, they're already touching your brake pads. They're going to get all contaminated. Nah, they'll be fine. A little tiny amount of fingerprints isn't going to kill anything. I just got to clean up as much of it as I possibly can. So I'm going to clean that up next, and then we've got to bleed these brakes. Bleeding it is a separate process that I'm going to cover in another video, because I've only got to bleed the front ones. The back is a separate circuit, and I don't see any reason why we need to cover that in a video, so I might just zip through it with a little fast motion something. Now this is your outer tie rod end. It goes right into the arm on the spindle, just like that. Once you've got that into place, you put your nut on the bottom of it. And these guys you typically tighten down to about 22 foot-pounds. Towards the end here, make sure that it's all right. Alright, that one's in place. Alright, we can't forget, but we must torque down the tie rod bolt to 22 foot-pounds. Wrench on there. Let's see, I haven't heard a click yet. There it is. That's it. 22 foot-pounds, and she's golden. And one of the last things that we've got to do, went out and picked up a clip just for this. Got to put the speedometer cable clip on the end here, right on the end of this, and it's just a little circlip. And that's it. That's all there is to it. I really like that the same studs that were on here, they're probably even the same manufacturer as what was on here before, which will make it a little easier to put everything together, because his same lug nuts work, and these are the same lug nuts that work with these wheels that he's got on here. Alright, that gets our wheel on there. Let's go ahead and drop it on the ground and see what it looks like. I think that's a pretty good change over where it was. That's much better. Much, much better. It still needs to settle because the car has no weight in it yet. There's no interior. There's no gas tank. There's no gas. The engine's not there. So everything will actually settle a bit lower, perhaps even like that. So yeah, that'll be a heck of a change. That looks a lot better than it did. And before everything is said and done, you want to make sure you tighten up your lug nuts. And you could put a torque wrench on here. They should be at right about 80 foot-pounds if I'm not mistaken. Depends on the kind of lug nuts you have. Not only the size of them, but the thread pitch. So if you don't know, you need to consult your manual. Those are all torqued down. This wheel is now ready to go. We've got a good set of disc brakes on here, and we're going to cover bleeding them in another video. Please stick around and stay tuned because we're going to be doing a lot more updates on the bleeding of the brakes, the tie rods that we installed here, as well as how to grease the bearings. So, like I said, make sure you subscribe and ring that little dinger bell. Thanks so much for watching. Well, you've watched me do the one side by myself. That means the other side is up to you. Technically, both sides are up to you, but you get the drift. To do the opposite side, the only thing you need to be concerned with that's going to be really different is the spindle stub bolt that's on the driver's side is a reverse thread, and the one on the passenger side is actually a normal standard thread. Also, the passenger side is a little easier because you don't have to deal with the speedometer cable, so one thing less to worry about, but otherwise it's exactly the same process with a mirror on it. In fact, you know what? Yeah, it is almost exactly with a mirror on it because of the fact that that one nut turns in reverse. So how about that? As always, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click the subscribe button and ring that bell so you get updates every time that I put up a new video. So thank you very much, you guys, for watching. Stick around. There'll be 2 more videos that follow up on this one, such as packing the wheel bearings and installing fresh tie rods. So we're going to cover that in additional videos. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks again for watching, and till next time, see ya.